Thank you. Okay, so first of all, I'd like to say, hey, thanks to Oracle Groundbreakers. I just love the photos they provided, and really pleased to be part of this tour, and really pleased to be part of this user group. I've done it several times in person, and whilst I'd much rather be there, happy to help out. So when they told me that the theme of this event was going to be back to basics, I thought, oh, there's only one presentation to give, and that's my back to basics presentation around the Fusion apps. So Oracle sell it as a solution. It's not so much an IT-driven product, it's line of business. But those of us who've always looked after the Oracle applications or whatever applications you were using, we have a healthy interest in what's under the covers and how's it all put together. And none of that is important to the person doing the selling. But I think for us using it, those of us who've got that technical interest, we want to be able to see it. So my name's Debra Lilley, and I work for Accenture, and I look after their HCM practice within Europe. And I'm an Oracle ACE director, and I think the rest of it can be summed up in I've been working with Oracle applications since 1996, which is a long time ago. Most of that was e-business suite, but I've always been involved in user groups. And as a result of Oracle announcing their Fusion suite of applications after buying PeopleSoft, JD Edwards, Siebel, etc., I represented user groups worldwide, or brought together a committee worldwide to work with Oracle development on user input into Fusion. And that led to me becoming an ACE director, and it's led to me having the opportunity to share what I've learned with the greater Oracle community. So that's who I am. I live in the very north of Ireland, which is still part of UK, which is still part of Europe for a few more months, although I'm really not sure what it means to us that live on the island of Ireland. And I don't really care where on the land I am, because I'd much rather be in the sea. So that's me. And my local user group is UK OUG, and I said I'm Oracle ACE director. So I thought we'd start with a quick history lesson of how did we get to the applications. So, gosh, I wrote this article in 2012, I think it says there. But Oracle did their shopping, bought the applications, and then talked about this Fusion application product. But nothing happened for a long time, or there appeared to be nothing happening for a long time. And actually, what it was that once they started talking to their customer base and looking at what needed to be included, what was missing was some of the technology. So for instance, if I think about the application, the middle tier application, the one that Oracle used for eBusiness Suite would not scale for the kind of application that they were looking for Fusion. So they went and they bought, bought the middle tier that was going to do what was needed. And that happened over and over again. And we think of Oracle having acquired, I think at one point they were acquiring a company a month. That wasn't because they didn't have the experience and the expertise in-house. It was just the speed at which they needed to innovate. And for every pound or every dollar that the Oracle spent on acquisitions, they spent $2 more on internal research and development. So you know, if you've read, they spent $1 billion on purchasing different products for their Fusion stack, then actually they spent $3 billion on the whole R&D. I wrote a number of articles for Oracle right at the very beginning, talking about how this was going to impact the applications world, and how we as a user group saw this evolution of a new generation of products. Actually, for me, a large part of that was that technology stack. So we heard all of the components that they wanted to use required new technology. If you think about where they were, Oracle had eBusiness Suite, and eBusiness Suite is built on forms and reports, both of which were way outdated before Oracle started writing Fusion. So then it's about how do you take or work out what are the technologies that we need, and we're going back now to the you know, around 2012, and you're looking at, you know, what was around, and mobile apps were just coming to the fore, but we didn't, you know, when Fusion first started, there wasn't a smartphone. That came like quite quickly afterwards, and then the evolution of the smartphone brought in more and more mobile apps, and how was this application that wasn't even out there yet going to cope with all of that? So there was lots of things that had to go into the planning, into the strategy of what was going to go into Fusion. So I've said they bought all of these products, and at the time, the strapline for Oracle was powering innovation by simplifying IT. So what did that mean? It meant taking these very complex applications and breaking it down into components, taking the really good components of each, and then working out how to take that to a design methodology that would create a new generation of apps that would do what customers needed. And there was a big gap. There was like 6 years between the announcement and us seeing anything. And I remember the ACE program was in its early days, and there are very few apps people in the ACE program. And I remember Carrie Millsap, who's a fantastic performance guy, once comparing he said that listening to me talk about Fusion apps is like leprechaun physiology. Nobody knows if they really exist. And whilst, you know, that was gentle ribbing from Carrie for me, it was very true of how the market felt. Oracle kept promising this, and there was nothing there, or nothing that people could see. And in the early days, you know, they talked about we'll have it available by 2008, and everybody will be on it by 2013. Well, you know, by 2013, we'd only just seen it. You know, it didn't come as quickly as we thought. So anyway, it was released, and these people on this is Oracle Open World. There's a famous set of escalators that come from the main hall, and all of these people wearing these red jackets are from the Fusion community, a lot of which were user group representatives. Your own people were part of that, and on the day that they went general availability, I got the opportunity to introduce Oracle on the stage, but all of these people had been a key part of influencing what Oracle were going to deliver. So it's a great story for user groups. So they announced it in 2005. It was launched in 2010, although only to a very small group of customers. 2011 was general availability. And then it didn't become a cloud product until 2013. And I think that's quite an important point, because people say, oh, Oracle's cloud apps, and Oracle say they were built for the cloud. I would dispute that. And if there's anybody from Oracle on the call, you know, tell me to shut up if you like on the chat, but I would dispute that. But I also believe that cloud saved Fusion apps or has turned Fusion apps into a success. Because what the product does is very, very clever. And we'll talk about that in a second. But the problem with that is the technology underneath it is quite complex. And the technology stack was actually a barrier to implementation because there were so many different components to go in, and you know, the maintenance of that was really difficult. So people were put off implementing this fantastic suite of applications because of the complexity. And that just a few years later, when the world started to pivot towards cloud, that solved that problem overnight, because you, the customer, doesn't have to worry about the technology stack. So that became Oracle's problem, and it meant that whether you used a tiny footprint or a large footprint, it didn't matter. The technology stack was maintained for you. So I really believe that that's what turned it into a successful product suite. And then by the time we'd got to 2019, we had moved from a release cadence to a quarterly update. So now the product is updated every quarter, and we don't have upgrade projects. So that's a bit of a timeline. That cadence that we've moved to means that we get new releases or updates of the product with new content. If you think about when we were on premise, you know, an update or an upgrade or a patch was a horrendous thought, because you had to test everything. It became a project in its own right, and quite often an upgrade required new hardware as well, because, you know, the machine you were running on wasn't going to support everything that came in the next update. Well, we don't have that now. First of all, we're not worried about the hardware, but secondly, they're coming in small batches rather than massive big upgrades. And then also, if you think about your on-premise solutions and any issues that you have with on-premise, and you think about the support process, you'll be asked, what version of the product are you on? What hardware are you on? What operating system are you on? What version of the database? And that whole interoperability matrix means that there are thousands, if not millions, of combinations available. In fact, there's a different combination for every customer, and Oracle can't possibly test all of those combinations. And therefore, the majority of faults that are found are on that interoperability matrix. We don't have that in cloud. Everybody is on one of 2 releases. So we get 4 releases or updates a year, and they happen over a 3-month period. So if you're in month 1, you're already on the new one, and everybody else is on the previous one. There is never more than 2 versions. So that means, and those 2 versions are also all on the same hardware, all on the same operating system, all on the same database, etc., etc. So therefore, the testing process is far more rigorous and far more likely to capture the majority of problems. Now, I am not saying there are never any problems. It's not like your mobile phone where you just accept updates and hope that everything's okay. It's not like that. You do have to test. These are operation critical systems. You're not going to just blasé accept everything. However, well, you are going to accept it, but you're not going to do that without checking everything first. However, if you do find a fault, and they are found, but if you do find a fault, then that fault is going to affect everybody who's using that piece of functionality, because you're all on the same stack. And in which case, then it's much easier for Oracle to fix, and they're certainly more motivated, and then it's fixed for everybody at the same time. So, you know, those who go in the first cadence, the first month of each quarter, they will have a few more problems or challenges than those that come in the second or third, because they're all picked up and affect everybody. But you've only got 10 days, so your test system gets updated on the first Friday of the month, and your production gets updated on the third Friday of the month. So you've got 10 working days to identify any problems and have them resolved before you move. And there's no changing of those dates. Once you've selected your cadence, you stick to those dates. So you need to test process flows, things that can go wrong, but it's much easier to catch up. It's definitely easier to innovate. Oracle are producing new functionality all the time. They deliver functionality switched off, so that you're not forced into new functionality straight away, but it's available to you. And I've written lots of articles about Fusion, but I've put into these slides, which are available for you, a lot of links. And there's one on that update cadence that's here on this slide. So having talked about how did we get here and that testing cycle, what are our deployment options? Excuse me. So originally, as I said, it was on-premise. So you had to do the infrastructure, which was incredibly complex. You had to factor in the commissioning time of both the hardware and the technology. But we had some positive things there. You had flexibility. You could change processes because we had access to the process composer. And you were in charge of those upgrades and maintenance. So you had that flexibility over time. And then within 2 years, it had become a cloud option. And that gave you the ability to just use it, faster to deploy. You get all of those frequent updates and all of that value, but you can't amend processes. You can't avoid upgrades, and you have an SLA with Oracle Cloud Services. It's a complete new culture. There's a third option, which is called Cloud at Customer. And this is for customers who want cloud and all the benefits of cloud, but can't have their data in a public cloud instance. So they want to have all of the benefits of cloud, but they want it in their data center. And basically what happens is Oracle turns up with a piece of hardware on a pallet, rolls it into your data center, plugs it in, and then they do all of the maintenance remotely. And we see that for very secure organizations. Actually in the UK, we have a government cloud, which has additional security for government customers. That's not additional physical security or technical security or data security. The additional security that they want is that the people who are working on it are, in our case, people with the right to work in the UK and with security clearance with our government. But for some organisations, even that isn't enough. You have this ability to have what they call Cloud at Customer. And I remember talking to, this is a few years ago now, but I remember talking to the Panama Canal Company, and they were really interested in cloud, but it wasn't right for them because their closest data center was in the US and they couldn't have their data in the US. Now there are now clouds in Latin America, and I don't know what the situation with them is, but they would have been an ideal customer for Cloud at Customer. But just hold that thought, because on-premise is no longer available. You can't buy on-premise for Fusion. There are a few customers who are still on-premise from before Oracle went to cloud, but Oracle are doing everything possible to get them into that cloud concept, because of course what they did was what we all did on-premise, was they customized their applications, and then you get all of those problems with maintenance going forward. So currently, the only options are public cloud and cloud at customer. I do know of one customer that is cloud at customer disconnected, and what that means is that Oracle don't do the support remotely. They actually have somebody who's physically on that site. But you can imagine that that comes with an additional cost as well. So it really has to be business driven if they go beyond that model. So let's have a look at some of the myths that we have and try and break down some of those. So is it called Fusion? Right, so I wrote a lovely article about this on a guest blog for Oracle, and I was so clear in my mind, but so all Fusion applications are now cloud. True. Well, there are those few that aren't. Not all cloud applications started life as Fusion applications. That's true. So for instance, Taleo is a cloud application, but it wasn't a Fusion application, it was an acquisition. Cloud applications don't have to be software as a service. That's not true. So we had that, there was a tiny period of time when you could have bought Fusion on-premise or on cloud, but that's not true today. And let me go back to that. Oracle then said that we shouldn't be using the word Fusion, we should just call them cloud applications. And at one point in a project, I would have a cup in the middle of the table, and every time someone said the F word, every time someone said Fusion, I'd make them put £1 in that cup, and that paid for the coffees for the whole project because everybody called it. And this article that's here was about, you know, their changing of that name and the dropping of the Fusion term. But then 2 years ago, Larry Ellison started calling it Fusion again. And the latest product available from them is Fusion Analytics, which I will talk about in a minute. And, you know, it's a new product and it's called Fusion. So the word is back. Fusion is there again. Okay, so the next myth is SaaS is sealed, you cannot customize it. And that is absolutely true. You can extend it. The use of flex fields is incredibly rich, much richer than we had in eBusiness Suite. You can coexist it with third-party bespoke extensions, bespoke applications, or you can write your own application and coexist. And you can integrate it with robotic processing, with digital assistants, with AI. So you can extend it, but you cannot customize the core data model or the core application. And I put this little icon in the bottom because I tell everybody that before we start a project, and then, I don't know, we'll be in the project for a few weeks and there'll be a query or a problem, and somebody in the technical team will say, oh, don't worry about it, I'll just run a SQL script. Nope, you can't. You can't run SQL because there's no database connection. So you cannot get into the database to run a SQL statement. You cannot write Apex against it because you can't get to the database. We always have to have a separate instance, a separate database, and build a separate application and run the two together. Okay, we don't have access into the application. The next myth is that everything from EBS, or PeopleSoft, or JD Edwards, or Siebel is in Fusion. Well, that's not true. There are a few languages that aren't supported, although most are. Not all localizations are there. I think most of those are government type localizations, but localizations like addresses, like regional information, they're all there. If you happen to be federal government in the US or even in Southern Ireland, then there's no cash accounting. There's only accrual accounting, which is a you know, an accounting standard that very few people use, but there were some that were using it. And not all payrolls, in fact, lots of payrolls aren't supported. And this is where Oracle have looked at their customer base and discovered that the millions that they poured into a particular payroll resulted in 1 or 2 people using that payroll. So there isn't the cost effectiveness of all of the payrolls. So let's have a quick look underneath. So I talked about the technology being the middleware. So if I look on the left-hand side, this is my beautiful, beautiful instance diagram of a customer's IT estate. And it would be multiple different applications, and they would all be integrated all over the place, point-to-point integrations, complete inability to even draw it. And then when you unpicked it, it was completely different than the drawing. And then Oracle had their middleware, and it wasn't even called Fusion middleware at the time, but they had their middleware stack. And the idea was that you could have any application, and if you had one integration platform, which at the time was their SOA platform, that gave you the orchestration of data around those different applications. And you had their analytics platform, which at the time was called Oracle BI EE, or Oracle Business Intelligence Enterprise Edition, which gave you insight into all of those applications. And then you had things like Web Center that gave you a single portal onto all of them. So the idea was that you had all of your components behind your middleware, and your middleware then enabled you to have a rich user experience presented to them. So if we have a quick think about what was in Fusion middleware at the time, there was, you know, enterprise management and identity management, the development tools. So we're talking about application developer framework at the time, business intelligence, EPM, content management, SOA, process management. All of those things made up the technology when they first built the Fusion applications. And what they did was they took a unified integrated data model. So what does that mean? Right. So basically, if you think of the release 12 version of eBusiness Suite, that is very much the same main part of the schema that Fusion was built on. And that's all. They took the schema, but lots of things happened between release 11 and release 12, where Oracle recognized that PeopleSoft did a better way of looking at hierarchies. So that moved into eBusiness Suite in release 12. They found some information about logical data striping, so where data was held, that moved into release 12. So a number of those things were you know, eBusiness Suite people benefited from them in release 12. So Oracle took that basic schema, but there was lots of other parts of that schema, like the FND tables that looked after the administration. They're not in, or very few of them are in the Fusion data model. They're looked after in a separate repository. But the main part of the schema looked very much like eBusiness Suite. And they used JDeveloper and ADF, and everything was stored in metadata. Okay, so what does that mean? What does metadata mean over and above the technology that was used previously? Well, first of all, what it means is that Oracle deliver the metadata, which is their code line, and then we might have some configuration that's peculiar to us, and it might be something that Oracle have done for a particular industry or a particular region, and it might be something that we've done for our organization. And then as an individual, you might do some personalization, so determine where you want to see something on the screen or suppress some fields or whatever. And what that means is that when you're actually working, the system says, okay, I'm going to take that base metadata and I'm going to overlay that first level of of configuration, and then I'm going to overlay this next level, and I'm going to then overlay the personalization, and I'm going to render a screen to the user. This is what they're going to see. And it means that two people doing the same job for the same organization could be looking at two different screens. The data underneath will be the same, the application logic will be the same, but actually the screen might look different. Okay. But because we're updating that base metadata, then when Oracle makes a change to their code, it's that configuration that's being overlaid again. And we don't have a problem that our configuration, which previously we would have done by configuration, sorry, by customization, is being overwritten. So we're not jeopardizing the Oracle instance. And that then laid the ability to have a much better user experience. And user experiences is baked into the whole design methodology that Oracle used. So they had, it's there to be intuitive, easy to use, simple to use. For a large part of the time, we had this concept of glance, scan, commit, which is still embedded into the professional user part of the system. But that was like, you know, if you walk into a shop to buy a t-shirt and you see a row of t-shirts, you'll have a quick glance at them, and then if one takes your fancy, you might look a bit closer at that, and then if you're really happy with it, you might go and try it on. Okay, that's the sort of concept that they had. So you could see top level information, glance at exceptions, glance at things that you're asking to look for. If something caught your eye, you could drill in a bit more, or you could go right down to the base transactions. And that sort of concept is invasive throughout the system for professional users. And we also get continuous innovation, and the continuous innovation that's happened in UX is things like voice recognition. So you can enter data through voice. You know, as the devices that we use, our mobile phones, as tablets, as that kind of technology becomes really powerful for them, then the application can make use of them. Also wellness, things like, you know, does your Fitbit or your Apple Watch or whatever you use for your fitness regime, can that be used, monetized by an organization? Well, in the US, if you can prove that your employees are fitter than average, or that they take good exercise, then you can get insurance premiums at a lower cost. A bit like we're quite used to people having machines that measure their driving ability, and then that can affect people's premiums for their driving. So Oracle has a wellness module whereby you can upload that data, and then it can give you information about your organization. Now, whether or not that's something that your organization is comfortable with is completely different. That's a different question. But the ability to do that is there. And then, of course, the latest real drive in user experience is the virtual assistant or chatbots. Not going into a system at all, just asking someone the question and being driven towards the answer. So we still have classic screens that look like forms, but these are for people entering large numbers of transactions. But a simplified user interface, where we started, at the time, it was very common to have, you know, round buttons, and nowadays then they moved to a more square type, and nowadays it's all one color. Now, if you think about your mobile phone, every time you upgrade an application on your mobile phone, an app on your phone, quite often the user experience changes slightly. And that's the same with the application. We go through various iterations of user experience, colors, what people are working with, what's become the latest research at the time. So why is that important? Well, the user experience is important to me because there is a need to extend the application to give your organization those bits that make your organization different from everybody else. And so when we come to extend, it's what's the right way to extend it. So I love Apex, absolutely love Apex. It does some amazing things very quickly, incredibly cost effectively. But one of the issues that Apex might give you is it's not going to give you the same user experience, the same UI that that you get from the main application. Now that might not matter, and I've seen many application extensions where they're only used by 1 or 2 people, or actually an end user doesn't see it at all, and in which case Apex is definitely the right answer for that. But if it's a screen that's going to be used a lot, you need to consider whether the UI is close enough for it not to affect the user experience. Oracle wrote Fusion originally using ADF, or Application Development Framework, and that's pretty good for professional screens, but it's not strategic to Oracle anymore. Oracle have moved away from that to a more JET-based. So you had JDeveloper with ADF, but a more JET-based development methodology is required. And the tool that they would suggest is the Visual Builder. It has UI templates that match what they call the newsfeed UX within Oracle. It's most importantly, it's mobile responsive. So it doesn't matter whether you're running it on a phone, a tablet, or a PC, it's going to take the form that's best for that device. And that is how all of the self-service is now, and how many of the professional screens have moved to. And so if you are extending, then they're the sort of tools, the JET-based tools we should be using. Mobile is very common for mashing up systems, so where people have got one application for doing perhaps part of their HR, and they use Fusion apps for the other half, but they want their end user not to know that they're in 2 different systems. So things like mobile cloud services are very common for building a mobile app that will bring in multiple processes. So I'm aware that I'm rambling through this at a fast rate, but I want to see if there's any questions. So let's have a look at data going in and out. So I'm going to start off with a Debra Moan. For me, modern applications should be simple. So everything should be API driven, is my belief. That's the single standard way, modern standard way of moving data around applications. But the applications themselves, there's a lot of time when bulk data is being moved in on migration, where you've got multiple systems integrating, where you're trying to keep them in sync. Some really strong cases for bulk loading of data. And there's a number of different ways that we can do that. There are some data loaders, there are some file-based data imports. There's a desktop version of the desktop integrator that we knew and loved in the e-business suite. But there are APIs as well. So it all depends on why you're moving your data and the volume of data that you're moving. I just hold that thought, because initially I thought the APIs were pretty poor. Reporting or analytics or business intelligence or whatever you want to talk about, the biggest issue I find is that a customer doesn't have a strategy. So that's not just what tool should they be using, but which users should have which skills. And the reason for that, if I have a look and see what there is, so when you enter information on a screen, so if I enter information about an employee, I see one screen. But the database has 20 or 30 tables that are touched by that one record. And when you come to taking the data out, traditionally you needed to know what those 30 tables and the relationships between them was. So the first thing that Oracle have done is put in a lot of views. And those views, basically, if you put your data in on an employee screen, then there'll be an employee view so that it's much easier for you to return that data. And those views, which are called Oracle Transactional Views, or OTBI, for business intelligence, those are used in multiple places. They are used to populate the analytics platform that's in Fusion, which is based on OBIEE. So it creates, so those views are the basis of the schematic layers in that analytics tool. They're used for extracting data, for different ways of extracting data. So those views are used a fair amount. Now, if you were an on-premise customer, you will remember that there was OTBI, Oracle Business Intelligence applications, and that was where they took data out of the applications for you and gave you pre-built data warehouse and analytics. Well, the problem with that was you could customize it. So we had the same problem that we had with any other application. Once it's customized, it's very difficult to maintain. And Oracle have just in the last 12 months released Fusion Analytics, or Oracle Analytics for applications, or it is changing its name on a monthly basis, but let's call it Fusion Analytics today. It's based on the Autonomous Data Warehouse. So if you've any understanding of the Autonomous product family, it's self-patching, self-tuning, very, very easy to use. But basically it has two warehouse structures, one of which is populated directly from the application with pre-built analytics and KPIs, and another one where you can use the full analytics cloud capabilities to mix that with any third-party data. So that's fantastic as well. And then there's specialized analytics, which is what's also in the application is we have embedded Hyperion or Essbase for financial accounting, and then there are some of the analytics tools that go with EPN that sit on top of that. So that diagram there tells you what I've just told you. Some constraints are around if you've got finance, it's got good reporting in finance. If you've got HCM, it's got good reporting in HCM. But if you're using both, it's not necessarily covers everything. The admin tables aren't covered in those end user type analytics, but we do have BI Publisher, which will allow us to get to those, to all data components in the database. So for everything else, we have BI Publisher. I talked about extensions. I've talked about analytics. We now have PaaS for SaaS. So Fusion middleware has moved to PaaS now, all cloud components. We've got Oracle Integration Cloud, which gives us phenomenal ways of moving data around. We can use those APIs, which have now got so much better because Oracle have been delivering content for the digital assistant. And when they've been writing those content or those skills for the digital assistant, they've realized that the APIs could be better. And so they've provided much better APIs, which we can now use for our extensions. If you want to actually have a look at that, I would recommend that you click on this link, because that allows you to actually have a go, and it's going to show you how to move data from eBusiness Suite to ERP Cloud. But it doesn't actually matter what you're doing there. It's actually helping you from both a business and a technical user to understand how integrations work. It really is worth 20 minutes to set it up and have a go. And I would pause for a breath, but also to say that the number one thing that cloud is change. We get a new version every 3 months. each time it's bringing more innovation. So there's no sitting around waiting for your next upgrade project. It's coming at you almost too fast. People love innovation during the sales process. They love the idea, but in reality they say, oh no, give us 5 minutes. Hey, we want to take a break. Can we just skip this one and come back to it next month? No, you can't. So change is coming all of the time. It is manageable, and after a while you get used to it and it becomes business as usual. But that's probably the number one challenge, is change. And I'm 3 minutes late, but I hope that whistle-stop tour of some of the components that make up Fusion was interesting, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Debra. Was indeed breathtaking tour.
I know.
A good history of where we come from. I do remember the first announcements of what Oracle then thought of to be the new cloud solutions. I think it has changed a lot since then, and not only their solution, but also the world and the technology has moved on very fast. And I think, like you said, probably cloud has been a big savior for the products that they were initially launching.
I really do think so. It was very, very difficult to implement and very, very difficult to maintain in the early days. Yeah. And what cloud also did was it didn't just simplify it for the big people, but it made Oracle applications available to much smaller organizations. And I think that was fantastic. In the early days, I worked with lots of customers who were not Oracle customers previously. And this was the first time that those organizations could afford what I would call a tier 1 solution, because the metrics wasn't on the application, the metrics was on their organization. So it really made it far more accessible to a much wider group of customers.
Yeah, indeed. I think exactly that's a big difference, making it very much more accessible. So I do have 2 questions already in the room for you, Debra. The first one is probably a yes or a no answer. Is the presentation available for distribution afterwards? From Henny Bastiansens.
I believe that I've uploaded it somewhere.
Okay.
so
I'll check with the board members then.
Yeah,
but
so I'm not sure, but I can more than happily send it to you again. But yes, it is available. I'm happy for that to be distributed, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And the second question is from Babu Srinivasan, sorry. Do you think it does limit options for customers to choose? Is there any other options for choice? Of course, I'm not sure at what part of your presentation this question was raised, but Babu, if you want to elaborate or answer, tell more, please feel free. I've enabled your chat, your voice.
I think it's still on mute though.
Yeah, I cannot unmute him. I can only allow people to unmute themselves. So.
Can you unmute yourself and ask me the question, Babu? Oh, he can't talk. Okay. So just put into the chat, is the choice about what they use it for, or around the upgrading capabilities? Having the upgrades. So no, there is no, right, okay. So no, there isn't. So currently we're on 20C. Okay, so it goes A, B, C through the year. So we're on 20C, and if you're in the first, there's 3 cohorts, so you can be month 1, month 2, or month 3, and you can change it once, and or you can change it in an emergency, but you can't say, hey, this time I want to be in the second cohort. So what normally happens is that people choose to be in the first cohort during their implementation phase, because if they find something or they're looking for something new, they want it as quickly as possible. But then they tend to choose a cadence that suits their operations better once they've gone live. And you cannot change, you cannot opt out, right? And you cannot, yeah, so if you're on 20C now and the next one is 20D, you can't skip that and go straight to 21A. You have to take them, and you have to take it at your agreed time, and it just happens. You don't do anything to make it happen. It just happens. If you are on cadence 1, then on the first Friday of the first month you get it in test, and 2 weeks later you get it in live, whether you like it or not. Now that sounds very harsh, but I've worked with lots and lots of customers, and whilst I've had a few severity 1 issues, they were all resolved within that 10 days. Okay, because everybody is on that same platform, that same stack. No problem.
Thanks, Debra. Not sure if there's any more questions we have. I'll say otherwise room for one more question. If not, then all that I can do is thank Debra very much for joining the OGB EMEA tour and the OBUG today, for being our guest speaker here today. I think, Debra, hopefully next time we'll be able to chat face to face.
I know, that's the, it's my pleasure to help out. It's my pleasure to share information, but I would much prefer to be in the room. But yeah.
Same for me.
No problem.
Thanks a lot, and thanks to everybody joining us today, and speak to you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.